Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's session on Introduction to Grooming Awareness, the first offering through our partnership between the National Council of Churches and Catholic Professional Standards Ltd. This ecumenical training is going out across the churches in Australia, and with us we have the National Coordinator of the Safe Church Program, Laura. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining.
And also today with us to take us through the presentation and have a discussion is Sue Crittall, social worker and a professional supervisor. Morning, Sue.
Good morning, everyone.
So as advertised, today we're going to undertake an entry-level exploration into the topic of grooming specific for faith communities. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping on the platform and how the webinar session will run. You are on a little bit of a delay given the format that the webinar's running. So please be mindful if you do ask a question, it may take a little bit of time for us to respond, but please have a look at your chat bar on the right-hand side of your platform. That's where we'll be able to see your correspondence, feedback, and any questions that you might have of us. And we'll also be able to respond directly to messages as well as answer questions to you all through the video. There will be some features that we'll trial through the session, which I want you to be aware of, that will also come up on the right-hand side of your window. We'll ask you some questions. They're called polls, and this is an opportunity for us to get a sense of how the session's tracking for you, some of your baseline understanding about the topic of grooming, and get a sense of all the participants, how you're tracking and faring, tackling with this challenging topic of grooming within faith communities. It is anonymous in the sense that we won't know who said anything, but it will give a percentage of all of you. So it's something that we hope will be useful in getting a sense of where we sit in the topic of grooming and how we're faring in our own faith communities. I'll also be making available a couple of files which will pop up as a download for you if you click on the link. But I'll also make available this presentation and the slides afterwards in an email as well. But just to make you aware that there will be some things pop up during the session, and so you know what they are. At the end, there'll also be a link that if you click on, it'll open up a new window to complete a survey to give us your feedback on today's session. So with that said, we'll make a start in the content. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and waters of the country I am now on, the Butchulla people, and pay my respect to their elders past and present and young leaders of today and also the future. I also wish to acknowledge and pay respect to any Aboriginal people present today, and I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians and elders past and present of the land and waters of the country wherever you may be linking in from. CPSL and the NCCA are committed to the ongoing work of reconciliation with our Aboriginal families and communities.
We acknowledge the lifelong trauma of abuse victims, survivors and their families, the failures of churches in Australia to protect, believe and respond justly to children and vulnerable adults, and the consequent breaches of community trust. Now, we have a prayer here for you this morning, which we're not going to read aloud. So we might just give you 30 seconds to take a moment, take a deep breath in, center yourself, and reflect on our prayer that we have for you just for the next 30 seconds. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Laura. Just an overview. Today is intended to provide an introduction to the topic of grooming for faith contexts. It is somewhat of an entry-level discussion aimed to raise awareness for church and faith communities to better understand what grooming is and the risks involved. It's to raise awareness about what to do if you suspect grooming and to feel empowered to do something about it. Importantly to note is that the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse has highlighted the need to raise awareness to the issue of grooming specifically. Also, specifically in the context of faith communities, raised as a really high priority. Now, underpinning this is the Royal Commission research report on grooming. I'll make this available to you now. It's a pop-up that's come up if you wish to download, but it'll also be in the link to a summary document that we have provided about today's session with some useful links and resources. So if you don't want to download it now, that's okay. There will be a link provided to you.
Today we are joined by Sue Crittall, who Daniel has already introduced. Sue's introduction to grooming presentation is exactly that. It is an introduction to the what, when, how, who, and where of grooming. The key purpose of this presentation is to give you the information you need to understand and identify grooming behaviour and to be confident to report it to your leaders and authorities. We know that church and faith settings by nature try to be welcoming, inviting and accepting places for all people. However, it's been revealed to us through the Royal Commission that this is the exact environment that offenders seek out, looking for vulnerable adults and children to groom. Sue's presentation will provide information for you to adapt to your faith context so you can become more aware of grooming behaviours that you might observe, also encouraging you to continue to provide safe, inclusive and compassionate communities. This is an introductory session. We know some of you may already be more advanced in your understanding. Welcome and thank you for joining. For those who have joined to learn more and understand how you can play a vital role in reporting to your leaders and authorities, thank you. We have been overwhelmed by the breadth of registrations from across all denominations today. We have with us representatives from the Catholic Church and church entities, Salvation Army, Lutheran, Uniting Church, Presbyterian, Anglican, Seventh-day Adventist, independent churches, to name a few. We have those joining us from agencies and schools contexts around Australia, and we also have representatives from our regulatory bodies. Thank you, all of you, for taking this issue so seriously, and we hope you find the presentation by Sue informative. We'll be having a Q&A at the end of the webinar, as Daniel has said, so please take time to think through these questions and take the most of this opportunity. Now we'll go on to Sue's presentation.
Thanks, Laura. Couple of things just to note. As I mentioned, there will be some polls that will pop up during the presentation and for the remainder of today's session. I'm going to publish one now to let you know what it will look like, and I'd love for you to respond. These polls will be made active for a few minutes, and then after 3 or 4 minutes, I'll close them, and then I may pop up another one. So keep a lookout for that. Just before we hear Sue's presentation, it's important to note that we're trialling a new feature as a way to improve, will hopefully improve this experience, to have somewhat of an interactive element to it. And so what we've done is we've pre-recorded Sue's presentation so that both Sue and Laura and myself will be live, able to respond to any feedback or questions that may come up during the presentation, something that may not be possible if it was done live to you all. So note that we are in the background and able to respond via chat, and also keep a lookout for those polls. Okay, we'll hear from Sue now. Thank you.
In this presentation, I will be sharing with you about grooming. My name is Sue Crittall. The presentation will include material and information about what is grooming, giving a definition of grooming, looking at who might be groomed, where grooming might take place, the 6 stages of grooming, interrupting grooming, and possible warning signs that grooming is taking place. The PowerPoint slides that accompany this presentation are taken from the Grooming Awareness activity, a card-based activity that I developed. The PowerPoint slides that accompany the presentation have been incorporated into this webinar with the permission of the publisher, Mediacom Education. Talking about grooming can be very challenging for people. Speaking about abuse and harm is difficult in most cultures, including in the life of the church, in the life of faith communities. Talking about grooming is talking about those who seek to abuse and harm others and the process they use to make that happen. The material that is presented here may be material that people have never heard of before and they find it hard to make sense of. That could be you. It can be material that triggers stories and events for people. That could be you. It can make someone see behaviour in a new way, and this can be very confronting. That could be you. It can cause people who are survivors of sexual abuse to revisit memories. That could be you. It can be unsettling for people who have family and friends who have been sexually abused. That could be you. So please, recognise your own story. Recognise your own response to the material that is presented. If it raises issues and concerns for you that you need to explore further after the webinar, please take the time to safely connect to others who can support and help you. So what is grooming? Grooming is conduct that creates and then exploits opportunities to engage in sexual activity. Grooming is a criminal offence. Grooming involves a graduation or progression of behaviour from attention giving to sexual contact. It is a subtle process, hard to notice, and it gets worse over time. Behaviour may or may not be grooming. This is a shroud that groomers hide under. Parents, guardians, extended family members, family friends look to spend time with a child, talking, playing games. They find out about a child's interests and hobbies. They give gifts, they show affection, they hug, they kiss, they embrace, building warm, trusting relationships, healthy family life, and healthy extended family life. Groomers take these behaviours of healthy family life and healthy extended family life and use and manipulate them for a very different intention, for the sexual exploitation of a child. A definition of grooming is as follows, and this comes from a Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse research paper. Grooming is a process by which a person prepares a child, significant adults and the environment for the abuse of this child. Specific goals include gaining access to the child, gaining the child's compliance, maintaining the child's secrecy to avoid disclosure. This process serves to strengthen the offender's abusive pattern, as it may be used as a means of justifying or denying their actions. This definition in this webinar focuses on grooming for the sexual exploitation of a child. There are groomers who seek to sexually exploit vulnerable adults. The process of grooming an adult for sexual abuse also has subtlety, progression of behaviour excuses and justifications, same desired outcome, sexual exploitation. Who can be groomed? A groomer will groom anyone to achieve their purpose, the sexual exploitation of a child. The child will be groomed. Their parent, caregiver, guardian will be groomed. Mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, grandparents. The sibling can be groomed. Adults in the wider community that the child is involved in may be groomed. And in the church, in a faith community, that might mean you are being groomed by a groomer. A whole church or a whole faith community can be groomed. People are conditioned by the groomer to consider behaviour that they might otherwise reject as normal. Think about your church. Think about your faith community context. Churches, faith communities, are communities of faithful, trusting believers whose members are bonded together by shared faith. Relationship between people is encouraged and facilitated. Forming a special bond is a critical step for a groomer as they seek to groom. In a church, in a faith community, in that environment where bonding together is encouraged through singing, prayers, teachings, through sacraments and rituals, the conditions are right for grooming behaviour to be encouraged, condoned, and even enabled. Churches, faith communities, have a shared life built around faith. It is the very behaviours that grow the faith community, sharing, developing close relationships, making connections, making people feel loved and special, that groomers hijack and manipulate for their personal gratification. It is important to understand that people who abuse are skilled at manipulating relationships and behaviours. They identify vulnerable people and make them feel special, lowering defences and personal safeguards. Church members, faith community members, share a deep connection, a faith connection. They greet each other, seek to get to know each other, share information, turn to each other at times of grief and pain. They invite each other into their homes. They let children run freely between them. It is because faith communities are committed to love and forgiveness that they can be places where abuse and harm can flourish and be hidden. In a church, in a faith community environment, an adult's interest in a child can be welcomed and facilitated by other members, including the parents, the guardians, the grandparents. Parents may be pleased that someone is taking a special interest in their child. Children are encouraged to develop relationships with others. The giving and receiving of warm encouragement, an embrace, touch, a kiss, is built into community life. A person eager to go on a roster can be welcomed with open arms by the tired few that would like more help to run the youth group, help in kids club, be on the playgroup roster, help out in the kitchen, help with events. Members affirm dedication to the church, dedication to the faith community, and encourage trust. Members will accept behaviour within the faith community that they would not accept if it was to occur in a situation other than related to the faith community. In church, in faith community life, people might hold hands as they pray and sing, shake hands, hug, kiss as they greet each other, ask about what is happening in people's lives, learn about people's struggles, their vulnerabilities, share phone numbers, email addresses, remember significant events in a person's life, study together in people's homes, share meals together, have movie nights, drive children to activities, be at children's activities, all things that build relationship and connection. Groomers can target a church, can target a faith community as a community in which to groom. Church, faith community members interpret intentions in the best possible light, thinking that all motivations must be good, but a groomer can use accepted practices as a step in the grooming process. Churches, faith communities are full of people who encourage belonging and acceptance. Grooming thrives in places where people are accepting. In churches, faith communities, people hesitate to question behaviour, struggle to name that behaviour is not okay, struggle to challenge a fellow faith community member. Grooming thrives in silence. In churches, faith communities, there are people of goodwill. The church is full of people of goodwill who will give others the benefit of the doubt. Grooming thrives when people accept excuses or justifications for behaviour. Acknowledging the vulnerability of the church, the vulnerability of a faith community and its members to manipulative and predatory behaviour is deeply painful. Yet understanding this is essential to building communities of faith where safeguarding is a shared responsibility, is everyone's responsibility. A groomer could be a person who is young or old, an adult or a child, male or female, a single parent, a married parent, not a parent, a lay person, a priest, a clergy person, a minister, member of the religious, from any cultural clan, from any cultural background, from any cultural kin, a family member, a parent, a sibling, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a grandparent, a friend, a neighbour, a congregation member. Grooming can occur in a family home, in a relative's house, friend's house, a local church faith community gathering, a pizza night, a youth group, a day camp, at a prayer retreat, on a bus, in a corridor, in an office, in public, in private, in a car park, in a car, online. Grooming behaviour that occurs in public demonstrates to the target of the groomer, let's call them the targeted person, that others approve of the relationship and behaviour. Groomers convince the targeted person that the behaviour is all right, that it is okay. And as grooming progresses, they convince the targeted person that they, the targeted person, are to blame for what has occurred, that they will not be believed, that this is a secret to be kept, that something terrible will happen if they tell. The targeted person is silenced by shame, guilt, fear, embarrassment, blackmail, threats. A groomer will groom anywhere they think they can get away with grooming. Material from the Royal Commission identified that abusers of children could be seen as either situational offenders, opportunistic offenders, predatory offenders. Situational offenders. Something happens that leads to the abuse of a child. Opportunistic offenders look for and take opportunities to sexually abuse children. Predatory offenders are persistently and exclusively sexually attracted to children. Understanding what grooming is who can be groomed, the vulnerability of churches and faith communities to grooming, understanding that anyone could be a groomer, that grooming can occur anywhere, means that we can all be alert to the possibility that someone might be being groomed. There are 6 identified stages involved in the process of grooming. These have been identified by Wellner. As each stage is named, identify for yourself how the behaviour of the groomer progresses across the stages. The stages are targeting the person, gaining trust, filling a need, isolation, sexualising the relationship, maintaining control. Looking at these stages. Stage 1, targeting the person. Groomers look for someone who is vulnerable and needy, who has soft boundaries, who will not say no, who can keep a secret, who they can spend time with. They look for the vulnerable, the lonely, emotionally needy, low self-esteem, low confidence. They look for a vulnerable child. They look for someone who will enable them to gain access to a child. They look for children and adults to exploit. They look for a warm, inviting community that will let them have access to a child. Stage 2, gaining trust. Groomers watch. They gather information. They develop a relationship, rapport. They spend time to get to know someone, a child, their parent, their guardian, community members. They share about themselves being open and friendly. They look for opportunity to create connection. They spend time talking to a child, playing games with a child, mucking about with a child, getting the child to be okay with me being near them, to be okay with my touching them, and getting those around them, the parents, other adults, to accept what I am doing. Giving gifts to create connection. What gift would the child like? What would the parent like? In the online grooming space, groomers ask, who does this person I want to groom need me to be? For example, what age should I present myself as? What gender? Groomers test, what can I get away with? Stage 3, filling a need. This child is lonely. This child with low self-esteem, low confidence. I will spend time with them. I will make them feel special. I will be their friend. They can talk to me. Groomers show the child that they are interested in them, that they care for them, that they are special. Groomers watch. Are a child's parents pleased I'm talking with their child, giving them attention? Will they encourage my connection with the child? Create space for me to spend time with their child? Grooming happens in public. Groomers will show a child that others approve of the relationship. Groomers progress their grooming behaviour. Happens if I touch the child on their back? What happens if I change that touch to a little rub? How will they respond? Groomers will offer to assist the community with jobs and roles where they can be near a child. Groomers share information about themselves. I wouldn't tell this to others, but I can tell you. Groomers test. Can you keep a secret? Shared secrets help build a child's feeling of being special. Groomers nudge the boundaries to see what happens. Groomers test. What can I get away with? Stage 4, isolation. Continue to grow the relationship. Explore, How can I get access to this child without others near, in public and in private? Create conversation spaces. Look for activities that allow for additional time alone with the child for greater intimacy. Offer to drive them to an event. Suggest I be the person to tuck them in at night, to say prayers with them. Get in the swimming pool, get on the playing field. If I accidentally touch their private parts, will they protest? Will they tell? Establish emotional closeness with the child and with the child's parent. Look to create space between the child and others, emotional and physical. Show the child pictures, tell stories, use sexual language. See the response. Will they tell? Continue to present as someone who is trustworthy, who others can look up to as an example of a helpful community member. Show the church, show the faith community you can rely on me. Groom's test. What can I get away with? Stage 5, sexualising the relationship. Create shared sexual secrets, sexual acts, sexual touching. The groomer touching the child touching the groomer. Sexual photographs. Give and take photographs. Ask for photographs. Sexting. Give alcohol, pornography. Kiss and say, this is a holy kiss. Sexual acts and say, this is me showing God's love to you. Groomer's test. What can I get away with? Stage 6, maintaining control. Threaten, blame, shame, blackmail. Tell the child this is what God wants. Tell the child this is us showing love to each other. Quote teachings, quote scripture, anything to justify behaviour. Say to the child, you agreed. You are to blame. If you tell, something terrible will happen to you, your parents, or to me, and you will not be believed. If confronted, be shocked and hurt. Remind someone they know me. Create confusion in people's thinking so I will be believed. Get others to doubt the child. Minimise, justify, blame. These are the stages of grooming: targeting the person, gaining trust, filling a need, isolation, sexualising the relationship, maintaining control. Grooming takes time. Grooming involves a graduation or progression of behaviour. The groomer looks to move to the next stage, to progress their grooming of a child, the child's parents, caregivers, the community around the child. The groomer checks, do I need to take more time before progressing things further? The groomer tests, what can I get away with? So how does a groomer groom? A groomer identifies who is vulnerable, needy, who will not say no, who can keep a secret. The groomer establishes rapport with the targeted person, their family, their friends, the faith community in which they are. The groomer is charming, trustworthy, likeable, makes the targeted person feel special, tricks the targeted person into believing behaviour is normal and right, and silences the targeted person with threats and blame. Alongside the stages of grooming is a recognition that grooming can be interrupted. It is really important to realise and recognise that at each stage of grooming can be interrupted. And interrupting grooming early reduces the risk of the progression of grooming behaviour and the sexual exploitation of a child. I will go through each of the stages of grooming and talk about interrupting grooming at that stage. Stage 1, targeting the person. A groomer can be interrupted by church faith community members and the church, the faith community as a whole, being committed to being a safe church, to safeguarding, hold training and ensure people participate in that training. Ensure the whole community knows the expectations of being a safe church. Identify and discuss what behaviour is appropriate in relation to a child within the faith community, such as the giving and receiving of a side hug versus a front hug. Talk about being aware of how we engage with children within the faith community, seeking to be child-focused, child-aware, child-safe. Discuss how to comfort a distressed child, how to assist a physically hurt child in a way that keeps the child safe. Make everyone aware of how to raise concerns about behaviour, who to report suspected abuse to, educate to raise awareness of what grooming is. All of this interrupts the process of a groomer, as people have an active commitment to safeguarding, to being a safe church. Stage 2, gaining trust. If you see a person in your faith community engage in games with a child that is not appropriate to the relationship that person ought to have with the child, interrupt it. That could be games of touch and tickle. That could be seeking to put a child on their lap as part of a game. Interrupt it. Tell the person, we don't do that here. Our commitment to being a safe church, a safe faith community, means I must tell you to stop that. To stop that behaviour. And I will explain to you what behaviour is okay, what behaviour is not okay. Listen to your own instinct, trust your gut. Educate children about being safe. Check with the child that they feel safe. Follow the process of your church, your faith community, in reporting to the leadership what you observed and what you said. If the groomer is the church or the faith community leader, follow the reporting process of your church, your faith community for that situation and tell the appropriate person. Stage 3, filling a need. Trust your gut instinct. When you see a child being pulled aside, a special relationship being formed, an adult involved with a child to a greater extent than you would expect in their role or relationship, when there are unexplained gifts, toys, computer games, speak into that space, be active, not passive. Ask about the gift. Check, where did that gift come from? Educate your children that there are some secrets that we don't keep about touch that is not okay. Give your children language to use if someone tries to touch their private parts, asks them to touch their private parts, or wants to show them pictures or ask for pictures or take pictures. No, stop, I am telling. Listen to a child and check that they are feeling safe. Recognise when a child's behaviour has changed, act, interrupt. Follow the process of your church, your faith community, and report to the leadership what you observed and what you said. If the groomer is the church leader, is the faith community leader, follow the reporting process of your church, of your faith community for that situation and tell the appropriate person. Stage 4, isolation. Listen to a child. Believe a child. Watch a child's behaviour. Recognise when a child's behaviour has changed. If you see something that seems odd, that there seems to be a special interest in a child, trust your gut. If you hear sexual comments have been shared, that sexual jokes have been shared, act, interrupt. If you are told that a child has a special secret, with an adult, with another child, act, interrupt. Follow the process of your church, your faith community, and report to the leadership what you were told and what you observed. If the groomer is the church leader, is the faith community leader, follow the reporting process of your church, your faith community for that situation and tell the appropriate person. Stage 5, sexualising the relationship. Listen to a child, believe a child. If a child tells you of sexualised behaviour, thank the child for telling you. Tell the child they are not to blame. Tell the child that you must report this. If you observe or are told of sexualised behaviour, report it. Call the police. Follow the process of your church, your faith community, in reporting to the leadership what you have been told. If the groomer is the church leader, is the faith community leader, follow the reporting process of your church, of your faith community for that situation and tell the appropriate person. Ensure the child is safe. Stage 6, maintaining control. Listen to a child. Believe the child. Thank the child for telling you. Tell the child they are not to blame. Tell the child that you must report this. If you observe sexualised behaviour, sexual contact, report it. Call the police. Follow the process of your church, your faith community, in reporting to the leadership what you have been told, what you observed. If the groomer is the church, is the faith community leader, follow the reporting process of your church or faith community for that situation and tell the appropriate person. Ensure the child is safe. Behaviour may or may not be grooming. That is the subtlety of grooming. Normal behaviour with intention to exploit. This might be a hug or this might be a hug. The organisation Childwise notes that children are more likely to show distress through their behaviour and play than to immediately tell an adult they are being abused. Children may give subtle hints about the abuse without knowing what is happening to them is wrong. Childwise suggests that a child might use words like, "I don't like going there. He does funny things when we go there." The organisation Stop It Now has prepared material in relation to possible grooming warning signs in children. It is important to emphasise that these are possible signs. Unexplained gifts, money, toys. Refusing to talk about a secret shared with an older adult or with another child. Nightmares, difficulty sleeping, sexualised behaviour or play, sudden mood swings, writing, drawing, playing about frightening images, wetting and soiling unrelated to toilet training, change in eating, self-harming. Examples of self-harming could be self-mutilation, engaging in risky behaviour. There could be other signs. Change in level of performance at school, increase in school performance to block out what is happening, decrease in school performance due to difficulty concentrating, a reduced sense of self-worth. There could be a reluctance to play with friends. It is important to emphasise that these are possible grooming warning signs. You have to observe, check, listen, believe, act. Talking about interrupting people, telling people to stop, that can seem really difficult to even think of doing, let alone do. It is part of church culture, part of faith community culture. that people want to be nice, to be accepting, looking to engage with others, to encourage belonging, develop relationships, embrace people into the faith community. Faith community members want to be nice. Faith community as a whole wants to be nice. And wanting to be nice can mean that people hesitate to question behaviour, avoid raising concerns about behaviour, are reluctant to do or say anything that might lead to conflict, and will readily accept excuses and justifications for behaviour. Grooming thrives where people are accepting. Groomers thrive in silence. Groomers thrive where people accept excuses or justifications. Members of a faith community struggle to accept that someone they know could have caused abuse and harm to another person, let alone sexually abused a child or be seeking to sexually exploit a child. But abuse and harm does occur, and sometimes it takes place within a church, within a faith community, by community members, by members of the religious. There's a challenge for members of a faith community, for members of a church, as people committed to safeguarding, as people committed to a safe church. This challenge is very important to recognise. Am I going to risk offending someone by challenging their behaviour, or risk someone being abused and harmed by an offender?
So thank you, everybody. I hope that you found that presentation by Sue very helpful. The interaction with the chat was fantastic. I hope that that was beneficial. Feel free to continue using that. We're going to take a 5-minute leg stretch break before we get into the Q&A section and the last piece of this session, where we provided some more information about reporting and emphasising grooming is a criminal offence. But we might take 5 minutes. Okay, we're back. Hope you've had a good leg stretch, and some great questions and feedback again coming in on the slides. Sue, we're about to, Laura, as we go and have a discussion and start this Q&A, anything you'd like to comment on, or general feedback on some of the questions and comments that you've seen through the...
Thanks very much, Daniel. Hello, everybody. I very much appreciate the way that people have engaged with the comments that have come through the presentation, and the questions and comments that have been emerging through. A couple of comments that I would make, for example, in relation to Timothy Ross and powerful gatekeepers. This to me is an absolute affirmation why our faith communities have consistent approaches within them, that each faith community has to work with the systems and processes, not opt in or out of those processes. And that's a way in which we're actually working to ensure that gatekeepers are not going to be there. This is not going to happen in my church. It's got to be something that happens in all spaces. In terms of reporting to authorities, of course you report to authorities, but you also need to report to the church. The church needs to understand it's not an either or here. It's something that's done for both, and that's something that's very much a learning from the Royal Commission. In terms of the abuse of adults and recognising that, there's a couple of comments I'd make around that, and perhaps we'll explore it further in a couple of questions. But there is a recognition that vulnerable adults are vulnerable to predators as well. Some predators target adults, some predators target children, some offenders target children, and looking at what is acceptable behaviour in relation to all of us, absolutely children, but also adults. You don't create secrets, sexual secrets with adults. Learning how to be aware of what it means to be personally safe, to have the right to feel safe and be safe, that's for everybody in the community.
Yeah, thanks, Sue.
Thanks.
Sue, having looked at the presentation and the early behaviours of grooming in a lot of ways seem normal in the context of particularly family. So does this mean that I can't even hug or praise my own child or grandchild in public if we're in church?
It's certainly a question that I have heard, and I noted that it was one of the ones that did pop up in the poll. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and I have no doubt that there are other people who are participants today who are parents, grandparents just like me. And when my grandchild is at church, people see me as highly affectionate and close to her, cuddling, sitting near. She's in my arms. I play games with her. Yes, the early behaviours are normal behaviours that are manipulated by the groomer to achieve their purpose. Engaging, showing affection, playing with children, it's incredibly important and appropriate to the role and relationship with a child. Awareness about grooming and grooming behaviour, it makes us informed, it makes us better able to protect children who are in our family, who are in our wider church circle. It enables us to role model to children what appropriate behaviour looks us, and for all of us to have a part in reinforcing to children and others appropriate boundaries, children and adults. As a grandparent, I want my grandchild to be safe. I want children to be safe. I know that they're normal behaviours, they're exploited. Let's all learn.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Sue. So, Sue, we've fielded a lot of questions before the webinar, and thank you to people that have sent those in. So this is a question that's come in before the webinar from some of the people that go to the workshops out there. Is it really hard to monitor this in a small church where there is so much overlap between church, family, social groups, and family of origin?
It is hard to monitor in all churches if people aren't having a shared commitment to monitoring what is going on. Small church, large church. Monitoring is about being aware of expectations along with being attentive to what's observed and what we hear children say. We're looking to see that children feel safe and are safe in church and in their family life with whomever they're engaging with and within whichever context they are in. Being conscious of what's acceptable and unacceptable, it's a reminder of the importance. So it's hard to monitor if we're not committed. It's hard to monitor if we're not in a space of knowing ourselves, what are we actually monitoring? I think there's a challenge here. It's an opportunity to recognise a shared commitment rather than to shy away from the challenge.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sue.
Another concern or question that often comes up when we're talking about grooming within the church is, does this mean that we can't be friendly with children anymore without everyone thinking that I'm a predator?
Not at all. Being appropriately friendly is a part of enabling children to develop healthy relationships. And I can see Fiona Bly's comment there as needing to see our churches as places where they're the children's community too, where kids have a right to be happy and safe. This is about teaching ourselves and our children about healthy relationships. Vigilance does not lead to everyone thinking that someone is a predator, but vigilance does lead to people observing and checking that behaviour is appropriate.
Thanks, Sue. So following on from that, and it's along the same tangent, someone has asked, what do I do if a child approaches me for a hug now?
I think we can recognise sometimes that a hug is about to happen, though children can be marvellously spontaneous and the hug's upon us before we realise it. Seek to redirect the hug to be a side versus a front hug. And if it's a front hug, then it's a quick embrace, a catch and release. It's not a lingering, rubbing, pulling hug that invites closeness.
Yeah, great.
Does this mean that we can't comfort children when they're upset or, obviously distraught with a hug or physical touch?
Not at all. Children need to be comforted and must be comforted. It's our responsibility to care for children and to look after them. Comfort in a way that respects physical and emotional boundaries of a child. And remember that we link the children back into their parents and their caregivers. We have a role caring for children, but we must fulfill that role in a way that honours that child.
Another one coming, Sue, from prior to the webinar from people out in the workshops, and this comes up quite often. What about the concept of innocent until proven guilty?
It's an interesting thing, Laura. Let me share a story from myself as someone who is a committed member of my local congregation and someone who comes from a culture of giving children hugs, of embracing, of spending time with children, of touching a child on a head as a point of affection. I've had to learn that that's not okay. I've had to learn to change my behaviours. I know that I might have done that and then I think, gosh, what does somebody think? So I'm aware that someone can think maybe someone sees my behaviour as not okay and what's that saying? Grooming awareness is about being informed and alert. It's about safeguarding innocence. Let's be more concerned about the innocence of a child being treasured and protected than we are that someone might say, hey, Sue, what the heck are you doing? Which would you rather?
Yeah.
So true. Sue, another question that has come up and often comes up in training is, can this really happen and nobody notice it?
If all of us were sitting together, not in a webinar jam, but in a room, I'd be saying, hands up, who's read or watched anything in relation to the Royal Commission and who's seen that this has happened and people haven't known, that it has happened and people have suspected but not acted. So my answer to this is both, yes, it can really happen and nobody notices, and also recognise that people notice something but they don't join the dots. And again, let me do some storytelling here. Quite a long time ago, I was a young woman working for a parish as a community worker and working with a range of colleagues, with a range of priests. One of the priests in particular was someone who I recognised was very warm and embracing and charismatic and encouraging, and he and I got on with extremely well. I would see him embrace children, I would see him embrace young people. I thought nothing of it. And post working in that place, I invited him to my home when I had small children. And two things happened that I realised, not then, but later. One was when he arrived and my kids were playing in the backyard, he immediately started in a game of catch and tickle and invited the two kids from next door to come and play. I thought nothing of it. I thought, this is wonderful. This person who I admire is taking an interest in my children. And when he went to his car to go and get a couple of things to bring into the house, I was just standing there. It was, one of those places where you're really not quite sure where you are, but I was standing there near the boot of his car. And when he opened up the boot of his car, it was a catalogue of toys and gifts and alcohol and food in boxes in the boot. At the time, I just thought, hey, this is great. This person's got a nice gift for my child. I had no idea that what I was seeing was a method of operation. And that person, sadly, is incarcerated, though perhaps not sadly, because incarceration is what occurs when you sexually abuse children.
Thank you so much for that story, Sue. It's really powerful. So we'll move on to another question. Can various types of grooming occur at the same time?
So a groomer is grooming a child. Can you keep a secret? Alongside grooming a child, can you keep a secret, is grooming a parent to be there having access to the child, is grooming a community to be there. This person's great. We want to have them involved in the activities. A groomer might be sexually exploiting a child and at the same time be presenting themselves to the wider community as someone to be trusted and regarded, and to pray with a child at night, they're great. So the answer to that is yes. This is not something that happens in isolation or vacuum. There's lots of elements of it that all hold together.
Yeah. Just quickly before we go on to the next question, I see that there's a comment that says a webinar on recognising and interrupting grooming of vulnerable adults would be helpful. Yes, that's coming. Our next webinar is coming on that. So we're picking up on these things. Thanks for that comment. Daniel.
Sue, another common response that comes up in faith communities and churches as a whole is, how can we as a church, a whole church, or even as a ministry team, practice this? Recognising indicators, using words like, in our church we, what are some practical things that we can put in place?
I think the most important thing as a starting point is to discuss it as your faith community and get to a shared commitment. We are going to do this. This is the expectation that we have of each other and for each other and with each other. I'd be there. Let's rehearse what we're going to say. Let's be there saying, okay, if I saw this, what would I do? I noted the poll before where people were all saying, yep, I'd interrupt it. I don't know about you, but in the church that I go to, there's little huddles everywhere, little huddles of praying, and people don't interrupt it. They're reluctant. And actually being in a faith community that says, this is our standard, this is our expectation, that's going to be something that breaks this open and enables everyone to be educated, everyone to be informed, and everybody to feel comfortable with language that they will use in these circumstances. So I'm a rehearser. I'd be there. What am I going to say if this is what I'm going to say? And I'd educate my whole community, and we're all in agreement, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. On that, Sue, another question along the same lines, though, is, grooming can be quite a confronting topic. So how do we share this, and how do we share this type of information without scaring people?
I think I'd have another comment here about if we were all in a room together, hands up who as a parent wants to protect their child. Hands up who as a parent and a grandparent or a member of a community wants to be informing and resourcing themselves and others so that children are honoured and remain innocent and are not exploited. Parents know that it's a scary world out there. Parents know that they have to be educated to know how to care for their children. This is not a new concept. And scaring parents, let's actually refocus this on informing and resourcing parents. Parents educate their children to be safe. We teach sun safety, we teach road safety, personal safety, what touch is okay, what touch is not okay. That's something that let's normalise here. And I know as a young mother myself, I would have my kids lie down on the ground and we'd draw outlines of our bodies, and we're there, okay, what are the parts that get covered with our bathing suits? And we'd draw pictures of bathing suits and we'd talk about it. And I'd go through, okay, so it's not okay for someone to touch your bottom. It's not okay for someone to touch your breasts. Not okay if it's Uncle Pete. Not okay if it's this person, that person. And it became normal within my family. And I'm there. I think parents are more able in this space than we perhaps give them credit for.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sue. Critical there is having the conversation and the discussion, really, isn't it? And bringing it out of the dark. It's not.
And remember, parents are being actively educated elsewhere. The Daniel Morcombe Foundation, enormous work that they've done. The online grooming space, enormous work in terms of educating parents about being vigilant about what their kids are doing, those things.
Yeah. Yep. And there are some excellent, not for this webinar, but there are also some excellent resources provided around protective behaviours that we can certainly link you into.
And Sue, before I go to a question that was sent in prior, Luke has asked, How about parents who are potentially groomed, who, when you raise concerns, cannot understand or comprehend that boundaries may have been crossed or that the behaviour is concerning? Any advice there to Luke?
I would be there saying to you, Luke, and in relation to parents, if we educate people as to what grooming behaviour is, if we educate people about how to keep our children safe, and if we help people understand that groomers target not just the child, but the significant others in a child's life, and in a church that means you and me, that means anybody else who's worshipping on a day of the week, a groomer is going to target you and me to go to get things okay, have access to a child. So I'm there, work with those parents and understand how conflicted they will feel. But don't allow feeling conflicted and being concerned to pull you away from working at keeping children safe.
Yeah, that's right. And it brings me back to one of the polls that we put up really early on, which is a fantastic quote by Van Dam, that just as children are groomed by adults to allow them to perpetrate sexual acts, other adults are also groomed or desensitized to perceive potentially risky behavior as harmless. And that's something that we really need to be mindful of in the concept of grooming, to recognize that it's more than just the child for the actual perpetrating the sexual act. It's broader, and addressing that, as you said, having those conversations and raising awareness to what's appropriate, inappropriate is key. Sue, back to some of our questions that were sent in prior. Why do I have to be here when I don't work or volunteer with children? And this also comes up in the space where many people say, oh, well, but we don't have children in our faith community, in our church, in our parish. We don't have children there. So why is this such a big importance and an increased workload for us all?
Do you have children in your life? Do you have children in your extended families? Do you want children to be in a society that's safe? Do you want children to be in all church communities where they can experience love and real affection in a way that doesn't abuse and exploit? My response back to is why not participate in this training? You may have children in your church one day. Someone may bring their grandchild to visit, but even if you never have a child, to also recognise that having a shared commitment to caring for each other, and that goes back to some of the comments about adults being groomed, that be really aware that understanding grooming is a protection for children and for families, and it may well just be a protection for you.
Thanks, Sue. So along the same lines, again, another great question. Leaders and volunteers have a code of conduct, but how can we control or monitor the behaviour of every attendee, especially in their own time?
Well, I don't think you can. I don't think you can have a sense of monitoring everybody in their own time. And our focus here is on monitoring what people are doing when they are attending as part of a community. But learning in the context of being part of a community is about then what behaviour is okay outside. We can know that grooming happens in families, grooming happens in extended families, grooming happens in churches. If you're educating your people to have a better understanding of this, that's going to protect children both inside and outside when the gathered community meets.
Sorry, Daniel, you go.
Oh, Sue, I was just wondering whether you might have a comment about potential retaliation or, responses that groomers may have if you say something or if you, raise a concern about their behaviour.
Well, there's some interesting stories perhaps to tell within that. And remembering that when a groomer has reached the stage of sexualising contact with a child, they will use threats and blackmails, which indeed are very vicious in relation to that child to maintain what has occurred. Your parents will take you away from your family. Someone will go to jail. They're very vicious threats. there's also vicious threats that can happen in the life of a community. I'm well aware of one situation of a colleague of mine who I know really quite well and have known over the years, who has a conviction for child sexual offences and a non-custodial sentence in relation to that. The church that they have been a part of and continue to be a part of has really tried to manage how do you have someone, which I think our language is person of concern, how to have somebody as a part of the community in a way that keeps the church healthy. And this person has been vitriolic to anybody who has thought to suggest that they need to take responsibility for behaviour. And remember, this person has a conviction for child sexual assault. And that has been threats, etc. I'm there, stand firm. Know what is needed.
Thank you, Sue. So at the other end of that spectrum, I guess, is the next question. You know, what are the red flags in grooming with seductive language? And we know that you will go into this in your activity in the next webinar, but what are some of those red flags that you can, you know, point out around that, again, language, but the seductive language that groomers use?
Remembering that grooming has different stages, and so language is going to change across those stages. If you've got someone who has met someone for the first time, you might find, and remember, seductive language is language that is flattery, language that is sweet talking, language that's inviting emotional and physical closeness. I have prayed to God to meet someone like you, and you are an answer to that prayer. Tell me whether that's seductive language. God's told me that we will have a special relationship. I am showing you how much God loves you. If you don't think you've got someone to talk to, remember you can always talk to me. All those binding, inviting languages that come through. And really, some of those are normal languages as opposed to something that is unexpected. Let's not share this with others, but just keep it special between us. Very inviting. I love you. You can trust me. I understand you. The language that is going to be language that separates me and you from others. Let me tell you another story from my own experience that perhaps doesn't come across in the first instance as sweet talking and flattery. You all now know that I'm a grandmother, slightly besotted one, obviously, and that I was recently at the shops and I met a member of my congregation there who didn't know I was a grandparent. And this person fussed over my grandchild. And like many a church community member, I'm there, hey, this is lovely, because someone's taking an interest in my beloved little girl. And the next Sunday when I was at church, this person came up to me and said, I had no idea you were a grandmother. Your grandchild is just lovely. And I'd love to do something to help out, to help you look after that grandchild. So here's some money in an envelope, just something for you. I was absolutely stunned and surprised. It took quite a go for me to tell this person I'm not taking this money, why I'm not taking this money, child safety. You can all imagine the dialogue. That for me, when I look at it, was an example of sweet talk and flattery. So groomers, they gather you in, they bind you in, they use language that holds connection.
Thanks, Sue. And often something that invokes then a separation, like separating them from you know, parents or carers or you know, the community, even in language. So another question that's come in: how can I confront a leader in my organisation or my faith community, my church, who I suspect is acting inappropriately towards a child, or may even be grooming within my congregational context?
Confront someone clearly. Identify the behaviour that you observed and that the behaviour is not consistent with the appropriate behaviour in relation to being a safeguarding community. Name what needs to stop and follow reporting processes. If you're not able to confront that leader yourself, identify who you can report it to. Ensure that you act. Follow the reporting process of your community. So the encouragement here is act, interrupt. And when we go back to a previous question, rehearse, what am I going to say? In the Grooming Awareness activity, one of the interruptions that is there comes from a friend of mine in faith community. I don't mean to offend you, but you need to know that's not okay.
Yeah.
I need to remind you, that's not what we do here.
Yeah. So how can we support a child to resist grooming if it is a family member in their church congregation is the person that is doing the grooming? How do we support the children in that situation?
If you believe or suspect that a child is being groomed, you must report it. Regardless of who the groomer is, the child must be safeguarded. If you believe a member of your congregation is grooming a child for sexual exploitation, that must be acted upon, regardless of who the suspected groomer is and the relationship between the groomer and the child. Raise the child's awareness that they have a right to feel safe and be safe. That should be happening across the life of our church. If a child tells you that something has happened at home and with a family member, believe them and follow your reporting processes.
Another question that has come in, and something that I've encountered in my work with faith communities a lot, has been around integrating those with a conviction or a substantiated complaint or some kind of concern. Specifically, that relates to children, but and how that's done, and particularly around the comment, but as faith communities, shouldn't we be forgiving? The person's done their time. We should welcome them back. That's part of being, the church. How would you respond to that?
I'd respond in this way. I understand why people look to the narrative of forgiveness. This is not about forgiving or not forgiving. This is about ensuring that members of the community are safe, protecting vulnerability. This is about recognition, responsibility, risk and response. It's about enabling people to be members of a community, whether they've had a conviction or not, to be members of a community, and for a community to be able to monitor and address that risk. This is about being a healthy community. There's vulnerability here, and working with that is the key. Acknowledging that someone has a conviction for child sexual offences, it can be very hard to admit. I'm well aware of that, and I'm well aware that people can go, let's overlook that. This is not something we overlook. This is something that we take responsibility to work with.
Right. There's some excellent questions coming in here. And for those people, if we haven't addressed your question, we will get back to these questions. So thank you. Keep sending them in. They're excellent. And quite a number of you are sending them on private, and we're not going to get to all of them right now. But thank you for sending them in.
We are going to wrap this Q&A up so that we can stay true to our time commitments and the time that we suggested. I think I will give you an opportunity, Sue, for one last comment on faith communities celebrating the gifts of its members and the people in it, and how can this be done in a way that also supports those gifts and empowers the church, but is mindful of inappropriate behaviour and grooming specifically, and then we'll move into the wrapping up.
I think this names a challenge for all those engaged in faith communities. To foster, develop and maintain environments and relationships that are safe for all people, where gifts offered are received and enabled to flourish, and where trust is never violated. At the same time, being able to name when expectations are not met and when trust has been and is being violated. We hold those two together. And for me, this holds the whole together, that it emphasises the importance of openly discussing with each other our commitment to being a safeguarding community and our responsibility to do that and how we're going to make it happen.
Thanks, Sue. I might just make a general comment that if someone has a conviction, of a sexual offence against a child, then they should have no role in any faith community, in any organisation, in working with children. I mean, there's legislation that talks to some of this in states and territories. We're working with children's checks and working with vulnerable people checks. So there is legislation to support this. So just to answer some of the comments, and as Laura said, feel free to contact us afterwards, and we'll explore opportunities if you want to continue a conversation like this.
Yeah.
So we might go back to the slides now, and
thanks, Daniel. So just to pick up, we've had the presentation from Sue, and we've had a fantastic Q&A session, around prevention. But as Daniel mentioned, grooming is a criminal offence. Grooming is recognised as a criminal offence in each state and territory across Australia. For example, in Victoria, it's a criminal offence with a 10-year sentence. For more information about each state and territory legislation and respective regulatory bodies, we have provided that information for you in the summary sheet, which Daniel will upload here.
I've just made that available, Laura.
Yep, thank you. So please take some time to have a look at that, because obviously we are reaching out to everyone across different states and territories. So please take the time to go and have a look at your particular state and territory.
Thanks, Laura. Just to follow on from that, if you suspect grooming has occurred or is occurring, a great resource and link is the National Police Link number 131444. It will connect you to your local state or territory police. If there is a criminal offence occurring, a child is in immediate risk of harm or in an emergency, always use 000. And where you have that identified, and it did come up in the questions as well, as far as having someone recognised within your faith community as being a safeguarding leader or someone having those responsibilities, also inform them as well. And it's important, as Sue mentioned, where you suspect grooming or someone's acting inappropriately, that you let the leaders know within the church so that we can put risk management strategies in place and stop access. So it's critical that that's also made known within your faith community.
So just as we come to the end of the webinar, we took a moment at the beginning to centre ourselves and pray and reflect. But it's really critical at the end of the webinar that we do a self-check-in, and you just take that moment to check in with yourself, see how you're travelling, and recognise that your self-care is so important. Perhaps the webinar may have impacted you in some way, and if it has, we have numbers here for you for Brave Hearts, Blue Knot Foundation, Lifeline and Kids Helpline. Please, please, please have a self-check. If you are in any way feeling impacted by this, we encourage you to follow up with a professional service.
Thanks, Laura. I've just made available, as well as the summary sheet, there should have been a link pop up to our evaluation. It is online. It will open up a new window in your browser. Please, I encourage you all before you leave to complete it. This partnership with the National Council of Churches and CPSL is something that we are responding to needs, and we are really sincere about learning, hearing your feedback, and also getting a sense of what will be valuable and be of most supportive to you in your faith communities. And so please fill in that survey. Let us know how today's session was, but also it will ask you a little bit about what your needs may be and how we can better support you. And critically for us, learn from this so that our future offerings are of value. There are some contact information here on this slide. You should all have my email. Also Laura's email there for the National Coordinator of the Safe Church Program. Sue, thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone.
And Laura, great working with you in this partnership, and I look forward to continuing. Next week, we have a webinar which is on the online space, and we have someone from the eSafety Commissioner there who will be responding to our feedback and questions, and so really looking forward to that. Hope you can join in, and then in 2 weeks' time, on the 28th, we'll get you back, Sue, and we'll go into an activity and unpack those 6 stages of grooming, and provide a real tangible resource to faith communities who would like to begin the work of raising awareness to grooming within their own setting and context. Thank you all. As Laura and I, we will send out an email to you all. There will be the link to the survey and some resources. Feel free to contact each of us. Thank you and have a great weekend.